Wow, his career took a downturn for a little bit there.
It's so exploitative and gross in this movie. Welcome to Big Name Bad Movie, the show where we talk about A-list actors and their worst films. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron.
And I'm Joe, and today we're talking about The Wrong Daughter starring Sydney Sweeney.
Giving you up for adoption was the hardest decision of my life.
See, I told you there was something wrong with her. We need to tell Kate.
You don't get everything, Danica.
Her name is Samantha Brown, and she is mentally unstable.
Where was Sydney Sweeney before this movie?
This movie came out in 2018. From everything that I saw, she was just in a bunch of like TV movies, like Canon Films type stuff, like Sharknado adjacent type stuff.
She's like a working actress, but she hasn't popped off yet.
Not at all. But this arguably may have been the movie that popped her off in a way. I don't know.
I don't think this movie popped anyone off, dude. It's bad.
Well, yeah. It came out in 2018, the year before Euphoria came out. So the timeline there is crazy. And obviously since she came on the scene in 2019 on Euphoria, she's been in the zeitgeist ever since.
Yeah.
But I did want to run through a few of her movies that she's been in over the years, and I want to just either get your take on it, see if you've seen it.
Please.
And also, like, we can rate it on a scale of whether or not you see her breasts in the film.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. The first one that I really like, Reality. Have you seen it?
No, I have not.
Okay, so it's a straight to HBO Max film.
And she was method in this one because she's playing an ugly person.
Right. Yeah. She was. Yeah. Exactly. I would say it's a similar role to the one in this film, The Wrong Daughter. Obviously, a big one that popped her off. I don't know why I keep saying that.
It feels dirty.
Yeah, it does. I don't mean. Look, I've tried to be respectful. All right. Obviously, she's an actress who's known somewhat for her looks.
Sure.
But I'll say
we see beyond that. We're not like other guys. We see beyond that.
Yeah, we look past that. We don't even what? I don't.
You're digging a hole.
I didn't even.
Let's keep moving with this. With her work. We're focused on her work.
Anyone But You. Have you seen it?
Love that movie.
Okay. I haven't seen it. I know there was like a lot of drama around.
There was okay. I have my own opinion on the drama because the drama was centered around her and Glenn Powell.
Yep.
Potentially. I almost said Colin Powell.
Dude, I almost said it too.
That's a movie I want to see is Sydney Sweeney and Colin Powell in a rom-com.
R.I.P. to the
goat.
Whatever the opposite of the goat is. Anyway, go ahead.
But her and Glenn Powell, romantic comedy. They have a ton of chemistry. I'm a huge Glenn Powell fan. I think he's so charming. I think he's so talented.
I think I've only seen him in that one movie that just came out on Netflix. The one where he's like the
Hitman.
Yeah.
He was great in that.
Yeah, it was great.
I'd highly recommend. Richard Linklater had a film, I think it was maybe 2017 or something, called Everybody Wants Some. And it's just a ensemble 1970s baseball movie.
Okay.
But it's Richard Linklater, who also did Hitman.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun. And that was the first thing I saw Glenn Powell in, and he's amazing. But back to Sydney. Yeah, she's great. Right. She's great in Anybody But You.
White Lotus season 1.
Fantastic.
Love it. Great. One that is on maybe everyone's mind this year, Madam Web. Have you seen it?
No.
Really?
No, have you?
Yes, I've seen Madam Web. It's great. I mean, it's terrible, but it's like I've heard people say like, oh, it's not laughably bad. It's exhausting. And it's like, I disagree. I think it's hilarious. I think I would definitely recommend.
We wouldn't be doing this podcast if we didn't enjoy, to some degree, watching a bad movie.
Absolutely. I like the torture of it a little bit.
Glutton for punishment.
Yeah. No, I think Madam Web, if you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch it. The Voyeurs, not a great movie, I would say.
Yeah, it's kind of a spin on the Rear Window kind of Hitchcock thing. It's a lower budget movie with a not great plot. I think Sydney Sweeney's performance in the movie is pretty good.
Yeah.
I think she taps into a little bit more like charm and like subtlety, kind of how she does in Euphoria. And I think her performance is good. The movie overall, it's not, I don't think it's awful. I think it's kind of just like, it's mid.
Yeah. Very middle of the road, but like somewhat well made, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then lastly, Immaculate. Have you seen that?
No, I
Okay.
need to brush up on my Sydney Sweeney.
I mean, stop following those fan pages and just watch her movies, dude, you know? But Immaculate, I would say another like mid horror movie. It kind of tries to go in like an interesting direction, I guess. And her performance is good in the movie. She's one of the positive aspects of the film, I guess. But
Sure.
overall, mid.
Let's talk Euphoria for 2 seconds.
Okay.
So season 1 of Euphoria, her role as Cassie, she, I think, is one of the better performances in the entirety of that season. It's almost just like that role feels like it was made for her. It doesn't feel like anybody else could play Cassie.
Well, and that's another thing I was going to say. She's kind of, in most of the things I've seen her in, has fallen into that more or less. Like in The Voyeurs, I feel like it's a similar character. In The White Lotus, it's a little different, but still like similar, like, I don't know, monotone, yet like damaged white blonde girl, you know?
Yeah.
But I agree. I think all the performances in Euphoria are great, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think regardless of what my problems are with season 2, she's one of the, even more so a standout in that. And like, even to the point where she's been memed on for the bathroom scene where she's like, I've never been happier.
I've never, ever been happier.
So I think that's like her strong suit. And
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
when the Nate Jacobs realization happened.
No, I don't even know why she would say that.
Like she gives her all to those scenes.
Yeah.
And she's also the kind of person, it's like, so I'll say this, in Anyone But You, the role was very different than Cassie or The Voyeurs. She plays this very confident, sort of like, doesn't give a crap, hand on the hips, sort of like kind of.
I should have asked, do you like that movie unironically or
Anyone But You?
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
Because it's like, it's a genre film. It's the same way that I like John Wick unironically. Not that they're in necessarily the same quality bracket.
But you know what you're getting going into it.
And it delivers on what you expect, and it executes it very well. And it puts enough of a spin on the format of a rom-com to be like a really enjoyable experience. I highly recommend the movie. I unironically think it's a great movie.
I know a lot of people have, as of late, hate on Sam Levinson for valid reasons. But I think
I did see the TikTok memes and stuff about how Sydney Sweeney does look almost identical to Sam Levinson's mother. Have you seen that?
No, I did not.
I've cracked the Sam Levinson formula. Step 1, cast someone that looks like your mom. Done. Step 2, make them as naked as possible in every scene.
It's a little weird. It's a little, Freud is having a field day with that
that's
show.
One of those things where, you know, I don't know how much we want to talk about Euphoria, but like going back to it, it's hard seeing all the other things that he's done where it's like you are kind of making a spectacle of like the sex of it all, where it's like, I think it lends itself to the story and the writing and the themes in Euphoria, but then you see his other stuff and it's like The Idol, where it's like, oh, so this is just like, he just likes to do this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not going to posit that 2 white guys with a podcast are going to be the bastions of discussing sexualization in media.
Sure, yeah.
But if I was going to add my 2 cents, I would just say, I think there's a classy and a cool way to go about like sexualized media. And I think there's a way that feels exploitive.
Yeah.
I think the first season of Euphoria toes the line but doesn't cross the line.
Yeah.
I think the second season of Euphoria, like it even came out in the press that Sydney Sweeney was pretty open about like being in the editing room like, hey, we got to cut this. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
She was pretty sexualized in season 2 and I'm like, what hit the cutting room floor? Because she already feels a little bit over the line. And obviously if she expresses as a collaborator and a colleague, you know, like that's the thing that I think people sometimes forget about like the whole production environment, like television and movies, is that it is a workplace.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like ultimately at the end of the day, these people are just coworkers, like they work together.
Yeah.
And so I do feel like that kind of put a bad taste in my mouth for season 2, knowing that she felt a little sexualized
It's hard to divorce that context from watching season 2. That's like one of my bigger problems. I do want to be like respectful in this situation, because it's like, obviously, like there's conversations about is she a good actress or is she just hot? And like you said, like the stuff with season 2 of Euphoria, I also saw a thing like right before we started recording this where I guess she is talking about how she's scared for her life because there are paparazzi outside her house asking her to like pose in like bikinis like at her home. It's like, oh, that's
gross.
Yeah,
that's gross.
Yeah, it's
and
disgusting.
Wrong. Yeah. It's clear after Euphoria that Sydney Sweeney became kind of known as a hot star.
Yeah.
She's not the first one. We saw this with like Denise Richards in the 90s, and we've seen this with like Halle Berry was in that zone for a while. And I think a lot of times you see a lot of women in film who are kind of start their career known as like a hot star, and they do like kind of the opposite of the like child star thing. You know, there's a whole trope where it's like you're a child star, you're like America's little sweetheart. You try to be more adult and you step into roles that are more adult. I think Sydney Sweeney, it's interesting, she was kind of known as like this hot star and has gone on to do work that I think shows that she's incredibly diverse and talented. Like Anyone But You comes to mind, and it sounds like her performance in Immaculate, even though the movie wasn't great, was a good performance.
Yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. Is I think, despite the connotation that she gets as a person or whatever, I think she's a good actress.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think she's a good performer. So.
And seeing her pre-Euphoria in The Wrong Daughter, I think we might want to talk about what kind of performance she gives in this film.
Let's get into it.
As much as we both think Sydney Sweeney's a great performer, this film is your run-of-the-mill Lifetime Hallmark movie, straight to TV, low to no budget. I think they actually were taking donations for this film at one point. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. I was like, I tried to find stuff about the budget. There's not a ton that you can find that isn't just like generic.
I think
like what a Lifetime movie does for budgeting.
Some dude's like mildly rich uncle just wrote a check and was like, make a movie, because it looks like it was filmed for $47.
Yeah. So, well, we can talk about the budget and stuff. On average, Lifetime movies have like it ranges from 1 million to 5 million. I would say the 5 million is probably, I don't know if you saw Kristen Wiig and Will Ferrell did a Lifetime movie years ago. I forget what it's called. Deadly Adoption.
Yes.
So that probably is on the higher end of the budget just because of Kristen Wiig and Will Ferrell. Or maybe they did it as a passion project. I don't know. I'm fully speculating on that. This one, I guess it has a budget of at least $1 million, but man,
it doesn't look like it.
It does not show. Yeah.
Let's talk about let's talk about the story a little bit. The overall premise of The Wrong Daughter, to summarize the entire plot, is essentially Sydney Sweeney plays a character named Samantha. She's in a group home with a roommate. She's in foster care. She's in a group home with a roommate named Danica. She's using Danica's laptop one day and receives a message.
She stole her laptop.
She stole Danica's laptop and receives a Facebook message that was meant for Danica. And Sydney Sweeney's character, Samantha, sees that this message is from Danica's birth mother, and she has a desire to reconnect. Sydney Sweeney then impersonates Danica, infiltrates the home of the birth mother, and wreaks havoc on their lives, eventually culminating in a confrontation that is deadly and gruesome. It's a psychological thriller, heavy air quotes.
Sure, yeah.
It's aiming to be
tries to be, yeah.
And it's in the spirit of, I think a good comparison, it's in the spirit of low budget 1970s family horror grindhouse films, where there was a big move in the 70s. You see a lot of low budget films that are like, it's a hot girl but she kills, or
with none of the style, none of the spectacle of those movies.
It's just like the hook is, what if your daughter was a serial killer or something?
And that's the formula for all Lifetime movies. Not that I've seen all Lifetime movies, but like growing up with my mother in the house, like she loved Lifetime movies. It's like every formula or every Lifetime movie has the formula of, what if this person has X mental illness and they have a mental break and like kill somebody?
I want to touch on the mental illness part a little bit. Their explanation in the plot, and we can go further into it when we hit the plot beats of it, but
we can get into it.
But the weird, first off, the movie starts off on a couple of wrong foots. First, The casting overall, we have the most generic sort of Hallmark Lifetime actors. They're doing their best with the material. I'm not going to dunk on them.
Right.
Anybody's out there getting a paycheck, I'm like, yeah, more power to you. And there's a couple of standout performances in this movie that are, I think, elevate above this source material. Sydney Sweeney's doing the best with what she's got, and we got to respect her for that. But the way that this
I would argue that sorry to cut you off, but I would argue that Sam Levinson saw this and saw her doing the outburst that she does. It's like, I can put that to good use.
How awesome would it be if The Wrong Daughter was the movie that got her a role in Euphoria?
Realistically, this movie probably, like, she'd probably already been cast in Euphoria by the time this came out.
Yeah,
but
she'd probably shot the first season or something.
Yeah.
But this movie was probably a good paycheck for her, and we're very happy about that. The way this movie handles mental illness, though, is abysmal.
It's more upsetting than I expected it to be.
After Sydney Sweeney's character Samantha infiltrates this home of this birth family, and
it's funny that you use the word infiltrate, because it's like it paints her right, like that's what the movie does. It paints her as this like maniacal kid who is literally off her meds,
cold, calculated villain. It's made very clear in the movie that all of this maniacal, murderous behavior is a result of her being schizophrenic and not taking.
I couldn't remember what
they use the word. They make it clear she's schizophrenic and she's off of her schizophrenia medication, which is such bad taste.
Yeah.
And such a lame,
especially for this movie, because like you can do mental illness well. I can't really think of a movie that comes to mind, but like it's so exploitative and gross in this movie.
It is. Like, there's a point at which you're making an overt, gratuitous spectacle of someone's mental illness or neurodivergent traits or whatever, to where they become a caricature of themselves.
At least up until 2018, I haven't seen any Lifetime movies lately. That's the formula. They do that.
She has mental illness, so she murders.
Right. Yeah.
I think we should break this down a little bit beat by beat. So the first thing, the film opens up, and the first thing I notice is on the screen, it says casting by Paul Ruddy. Just an interesting note. I read that as Paul Rudd at first, and I was like, wow, his career took a downturn for a little bit there. He's running casting on Lifetime movies.
Well, that's his alias in the movie.
Paul Rudd.
It's like David Lynch didn't want to like be credited for Dune when he made it. He like put another name.
But what
for
if
the
he
director.
just put his name as David Lynchy?
Yeah, exactly.
No one will know.
It's too similar. They would never expect it.
The film opens up on Samantha. Sydney Sweeney's character is in a hotel room with a douchey musician, like a rock star, and they have just finished hooking up. And the film has barely begun, and Sydney Sweeney looks up at him and is like, I want to go on tour with you.
I'm in love with you.
I'm in love with you. And
Yeah.
he's like, oh, I don't think there's going to be enough room on the tour bus. Like, I think I'm going to have to leave you behind. And he's like, oh, I think
also, we just met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think she's necessarily in the right here.
No.
Because she's trying to go on tour with this guy after just meeting him. Within 5 seconds of that exchange, she's screaming at the top of her lungs, I hate you, and murders the musician.
Right.
So right off the rip.
Well, it's left open-ended, but we can assume she either kills him or
knocks him unconscious.
Yeah, at the very least beats him within an inch of his life.
Commits an atrocious act of violence within 10 seconds. And then we cut to Sydney Sweeney's character is sneaking back into her foster home, into the room she shares with Danica, her roommate, climbing in through the window, the classic moment. But oops, she gets caught by the woman who runs the foster home.
Yep.
And so there's a little bit of a confrontation there. And I love off the bat how drastically this movie shifts tones from Sydney Sweeney's character is a brutal, murderous rampage to just like an angsty teen.
Well, yeah, an angsty teen that is like fully a victim of her circumstances.
So, how are we supposed to feel about her?
Right. Yeah. It's like you can either make her a sympathetic character who has a mental illness that she's dealing with, or you make her a maniacal murderer. Me personally, I don't think you should do both.
Yep. It's a weird combo. She sneaks into the group home and then has to have a sit down talk with the woman who runs the group home. And so they go into the office, and my favorite little production design note off the bat is the name of the foster home is the Safe Harbor Group Home. Not a bad name. But how do they display this to the audience? How do they make it clear that they are in the group home and not just a crappy office location that they rented? And what the set designers decided to do was print off a piece of paper that just says Safe Harbor Group Home and tape it to the wall behind them.
That's what you do. I mean,
it's so obviously
you can't even like badly Photoshop like a plaque on the wall. You have to just print out a piece of paper.
Just print out a piece of paper and stick it on the wall so we know that we're in the Safe Harbor Group Home and not some dad's office that they rented for $90 while they were making this movie.
Yeah.
We then introduce our key victim characters in the movie, which is a husband and wife duo named Kate and Joe. And the first scene we have with Kate and Joe is they are sitting on a park bench and they are watching families with strollers drive by. And Joe, our husband character, they're probably mid-30s. They look kind of like that cookie cutter, waspy kind of like, comfortable family.
Classic white couple in a movie. Yeah.
Classic Lifetime couple.
Yeah.
And
Kate is pregnant.
And Joe is very excited about this, and he's noting all the features of the strollers that go by, like, oh, this one has all-terrain wheels and this one has a whatever. And he's naming the models of each one of the strollers to show that he's an involved and excited father. And my first favorite line of dialogue comes up, which is Joe saying, he's describing one of the strollers, and he looks at Kate and he says, "Did I mention the state-of-the-art ventilation system?" Referring to a baby stroller. Which I love, because I love that, one, it has a ventilation system, and two, he's excited about a ventilation system.
Well, they're in Hollywood, so they knew the pandemic was coming.
2 years earlier.
They helped with the pandemic.
I'm like, what stroller needs a ventilation system? Like, what is this baby doing? Is it an incubator on wheels?
I mean, in actuality, it could mean like, back might get sweaty. I don't know.
Sweaty back babies.
Yeah.
Either way, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
They're excited. So we've established that Kate and Joe are this couple that are very excited. No less than 15 seconds later, we are in a doctor's office, and they are realizing that the in vitro didn't take.
Doctor's office.
Doctor's office.
AKA another generic office space.
It looks like like the cubicle back room of a Home Depot.
Yeah.
And there's a man who's just in a white coat who's supposed to be our doctor character. And he's like...
That's how you know. That's how you know it's a doctor.
He's just like, the baby won't survive. And this is 5 seconds after they're excitedly talking about ventilation systems. And now it's a very sad moment.
Brutal. Yeah, yeah.
So we've got a twofer now. We're dealing with infertility and mental illness within the first 5 minutes of this movie.
Handled very tastefully.
It's set up to be a good time. Kate and Joe are laying in bed. They're scrolling through Facebook, and they see a page for Danica Tyrell, and they realize, oh my gosh.
Go ahead.
That's probably...
Well, I think so. It's kind of like, maybe it's established later in the movie, but I think they hired that guy, Ivan, as a private investigator.
Their next door neighbor.
So that's how they found her. Because I thought that as well. I thought they just stumbled upon this Facebook account, which is... Like, how does that happen?
No, you're right. They've hired their next door neighbor who is kind of a computer whiz. We know this because later in the film, when we're in his office, he has like 4 monitors, and they all have generic like graphs on them.
Dude, I was gonna mention that as well.
It's so bad. But they've hired this amateur private investigator to track down Kate's birth daughter, her biological daughter, and they decide to send her a message. We cut back to Sydney Sweeney, who is Danica is her roommate at the group home. She's stolen Danica's laptop, and she's in the library of just a generic public library. And she's on the laptop, and she drops a, "What do we have here?" Sees a Facebook message pop up from Danica's birth mom, and Sydney Sweeney decides to respond to this message as if she is Danica, and drops a great line of, "Well, thank you, Kate. I really did need a new place to stay." So
I am a homeless child.
Yeah, she is a homeless child, and she sees an opportunity. You can't knock her for that. But it's clear off the bat that the motivation for Sam to message Kate and Joe and try is just she wants to secure housing.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like the movie doesn't balance at all between like the mental illness and like crazy axe murder. It's because it's like it seems like she legitimately just wants a mom, and that's why this movie's so like sad and upsetting, because it's like she just legitimately like wants a family, but then you have to like add this element of like she's a crazy mentally ill person. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's also clear that she's just trying to take care of the logistical needs of a system that has failed her and not set her up to have like housing, safe housing and stuff.
Yeah.
But she's also an axe murderer.
Right. Off the meds.
We introduce our new location, which is the Kettle Black Bistro, where Kate is opening her restaurant. She invites who she thinks is Danica, her biological daughter, but it's actually Sam, played by Sydney Sweeney, to come there. And we cut back to the library where Danica confronts Sam and says, "Sam, I know you have my laptop. You stole it," and enters the library.
Yeah.
Paint us a picture of what happens in the library.
I'm glad you let me take the wheel on this one. So she, I guess, kind of loses Sam in the library, and I guess she's like peeking through the books and very briefly sees Sydney Sweeney, and she gently pushes a shelf of books at Danica, knocks her out cold. and it cuts to Sam pulling Danica by her arms, like in a public library. I guess it's at night, but it's still a public library.
Presumably with security cameras everywhere. And
she drags her into a broom closet.
A small stack of books, not even the entire shelf. It was just a small stack of
Gently,
novellas.
Not even hard, just like slowly.
You could say she
They're like, we don't want to get kicked out of this library.
I would go as far to say she nudged some books in the direction of Danica, who is now knocked out cold.
18-year-old girl knocked out cold.
And she's hidden in a closet, and Sam just thinks that this is a great plan.
Yeah.
So we cut back to the Kettle Black Bistro, and Sam arrives and meets Kate, who believes that Sam's her biological daughter. They start to connect, and we establish that Kate is like a busy businesswoman. She's running her own small business, and she's very busy on time, very low on time. And Sam starts to ingratiate herself, impersonating Danica, into the home. She meets Joe, the father. I thought this was going to take a different direction. I thought she was going to try to tear up their marriage or something. I thought this where this was going.
I thought it was going to take a different third direction, but we'll get into that later when we discuss. We'll get into it later when we discuss further.
Well, immediately Sam runs into some logistical problems with impersonating Danica. The first is that Kate makes it clear that she wants to actually gain custody of Sam, and in order to do that, she's going to have to contact the group.
Gain custody of Danica.
Sorry, gain custody of who she thinks is Danica.
Yeah.
Which is actually Sydney Sweeney.
Right.
And
it's actually just actress Sydney Sweeney.
She goes, "Is this superstar actress Sydney Sweeney in my home?"
Anyone but you.
That was the alternate title for this movie. It was Anyone But You.
Well, there is an actual... So this movie's based on a book, yet it was based on a book called The Wrong Daughter, but it was almost called Psycho Daughter. Like the poster, when you look up The Wrong Daughter, is for Psycho Daughter. Just an aside, we can move on, but it's just weird.
I like that because it's clear that they were workshopping multiple titles for this movie, and then I'm just imagining the pitch meeting.
Psycho Daughter, definitely a worse title.
Definitely. But I like how they stopped. I think they probably had two ideas, and they stopped at The Wrong Daughter. That's where they went. They were like, "What do we got? Psycho Daughter? Nah, The Wrong Daughter.
Too far.
What is she? Well, I guess she's not the right daughter." Just call it a day. In order to get past this logistical problem of Kate wanting to adopt who she believes is Danica, Sam conspires to go to a park, and she's going to give a homeless woman $20 to get on the phone with Kate and pretend to be the leader of the foster home and essentially get her off of her back. And so we open on a park location that looks like a beautiful greenway of a small town. And again, the amazing set design coming in. They just hung a tarp from the tree and have a woman who is clearly dirtier than any unhoused individual I've ever seen in my life, where they've messed up her hair in a particular way to really drill home that she is homeless.
Yeah.
Because she looks disgusting. And she's by herself sitting on the ground in dirty white clothes under just a tarp.
You got to put white clothes on her because they look dirtier when they're dirty.
Yeah, exactly. She's not like under a bridge or like in like on a park bench. It's just a nice little quaint park with a tarp from Home Depot.
They just threw some trash on.
They just threw some trash around and we're like, this is a homeless encampment.
Yeah. Tent town right here.
I like to imagine that the homeless woman character was like walking through and just was like, right here. Like, this is it. This is the house.
This is where we plant our flag.
This is where we plant our flag in the middle of this natural area.
Yeah. So she tells her she's gonna pay her if she pretends to be the head of the foster home where she was at, and calls Kate and to like discuss Danica.
Yep.
Or something.
And the homeless woman does like a surprisingly great job of impersonating a foster home director. Like she knows the lingo.
A bad one, but yeah.
Yeah. She's kind of she's an awful person on the phone, but she's like, oh yeah, I'll just send you some paperwork and we'll sign her over to you without ever meeting you. And Kate is apparently satisfied with this and is like, okay, cool. That's how the system works.
Yeah. Well, I think she's just like, oh, it's just a neglectful foster home director, probably. Yeah.
And then my favorite character moment of Sydney Sweeney's character happens next, where the woman goes, all right. And she's like, if I'm going to do this, I want $40.
Yeah.
And Sydney Sweeney's like, F off. I'm not paying you a dime.
She tells her that after the call. Yeah.
After
she says something like, who do you think I am, Obama, or some shit like that?
What? No, she goes, what am I, the welfare office?
Oh yeah.
It was bad. And I love that moment because it's like, we've now got so many mixed messages about our main character. So she's a abandoned child who is trying her best to survive in a broken system. Mm-hmm. She's also mentally ill, and we've seen her not take her medication. We established that earlier. And now she's just an awful human who is going to rob a homeless woman of $20 or $40 that they agreed to have in exchange for this
You
deal.
would think as someone a part of a broken system, she would like have sympathy for this unhoused person. She herself is unhoused.
But no, she's just going to stiff the lady and move on. This is where I think the most confusing aspect of the film pops up for me, and maybe you can help me unpack this a little bit. Back at Kate and Joe's house, Sam, who is impersonating Danica, is now living there. She's like fully ingratiated into the home. There's a lot of trust being built. We have the mom. Kate is like trying to like build bonds and all this stuff. Yep. And Sam she notices on the wall that there's a picture of Kate and Joe at a cabin. And Sam becomes very fixated on getting to visit this cabin.
Yes.
She starts creating drama in the home, pressuring Kate to take her to the cabin. She's like, she knows that Kate's in the middle of opening this restaurant and she's a very busy businesswoman. Yeah. And Sam is just...
Would be perfectly reasonable to not want to go out of town at this moment in time.
Correct. And Sam is really putting the burner on, saying, no, I want to go to this cabin. I don't know why.
That is true. I don't know why either. It's just like she just wants to go, which again, this could be like painting her more sympathetically, which is like she just wants to have that thing that she's never had, which is like a fun cabin vacation with her family, which is not the menacing thing that the movie paints it as.
But at this point she's already stiffed a homeless woman, intentionally stopped taking her medication, knocked a woman unconscious, potentially murdered a man within the first 5 minutes, and now she just kind of wants to vibe out at the cabin.
Yeah,
she wants a little lake house getaway,
which is evil. She wants to hang out at a cabin with her family.
She wants some R&R.
Yeah.
It's like, all right.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. Yeah. Kate and Joe, very excited to show off. They're like the sweetest characters. Like they're clearly trying their best. We've established them as like almost the perfect couple. They really want to throw a block party / cookout to introduce Danica
to the neighborhood,
who's actually Samantha, into the neighborhood and meet all the neighbors. This is where we also meet and start to really get to know the mom's best friend, Melissa, who is kind of her colleague and business partner in the restaurant. Yeah. And clearly they have a lot of history. They're longtime friends. And for some reason, Samantha is very jealous of Melissa.
There's something that happens, but I can't remember.
I think it's just that there was a phone exchange, and it's like Melissa's mildly dismissive of who she thinks is Danica, says like, hey, your mom's busy right now.
Right.
And for some reason that sets off Sydney Sweeney's character. She hates this woman. She wants to ruin her life. She wants to drive a wedge between Kate and Melissa.
Yep.
And so this brutal axe murderer who knocks people out indiscriminately, who potentially murders musicians that they hook up with, decides the best course of action to really drive the knife into Melissa's heart is to go into the backyard, Kate's backyard, and stomp out the flower garden that Melissa and Kate have been working on together. That's her big...
Yeah. Psychopathic moment.
That's her psychopathic moment, is just stomping on some flowers. Not even fully destroying the garden, just kind of tarnishing it or vandalizing it a little bit.
Yep.
And
Melissa's boyfriend is the PI that they hired to find Danica in the first place. And he, I guess, filming Sydney Sweeney destroying the garden.
Which, if that is true, why do you have the camcorder out? Why are you pointing it at the 18-year-old
Why
next
didn't
door?
you stop her in the moment?
Yeah. What's going on here, Ivan? I'll say this. Of all the performances in this movie, the dude who played Ivan, let's give him a quick shout out. Shout out to Jesse Pepe. I truly believe this was the standout performance of the movie.
Really?
I legitimately thought he was like the only guy who, when I was watching it for a moment, I forgot that I was watching a made-for-TV movie.
Okay. I mean, I didn't think he was any worse than any of the other performances, I guess.
I felt like he had a subtlety and like an interesting like take on the character that felt like...
He was trying to do something.
He was trying to do something, and clearly he took the material, I think, more seriously than a lot of the other performers in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, I respect that, Jesse.
Yeah.
He was hired for a job and he knocked it out of the park. I think he was a good performer and he did a good job. After he catches...
Shout out Jesse.
After the garden is destroyed, they have the block party. The show must go on. We're still going to have this cookout even though the garden is destroyed. And there's a confrontation.
Minor inconvenience.
This minor inconvenience, and there's a legitimate like concern between Kate and Joe. They're like, can we still have the cookout without the flower garden? Which I thought was just a nice detail.
Yeah. Good shit.
There's a confrontation between Melissa and Ivan, her boyfriend, the PI. They confront Samantha, who they believe is Danica, and they say like, hey, we've got you on video destroying this garden, and we're really thinking we should probably tell Kate about this. This is a weird thing for you to do. It's kind of erratic behavior.
Yep.
Can't blame Melissa and Ivan for this response. And so the next morning, Samantha tells Joe, hey, I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go for a walk, clear my head. She goes over to Ivan's house to have a conversation. So she goes next door. She goes to Ivan's house. And I want you to describe kind of what this scene looks like.
So we walk in. He's got this. First of all, they have 2 giant houses and they're supposed to be in LA. Just want to throw that out there. Multi-millionaires with this private PI work. Yeah. And she's able to like start this restaurant while not working or whatever. It's fine. He has like this setup of all these computers and they have like these, I don't even know what you would call them. It's just like, it's supposed to look like techie
generic data.
Yeah. Generic data, like, binary or whatever. And then like a sound wave monitor or whatever. It's like, what is all this shit? And so he has this conversation with who he believes is Danica about like, look, she has a very like, I guess, sympathetic moment where she's like, I'm just trying to like have a family that I never had. And it's like, yeah, that's legitimate. That seems like a normal thing to want as a kid who grew up in an orphanage. And he's like, wow, I wasn't expecting you to be that genuine with me. Like, it seems like you're a good kid with a good head on your shoulders or whatever. I need you to tell Kate and Joe what happened.
Which seems like a reasonable exchange. Yeah. He's just like, hey, I'll delete the video. It's going to be as if it never existed. Just fess up.
Yeah.
And
she's like, okay. And then she pushes him down a flight of stairs
and murders him.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like, hey, I vandalized your garden, she feels the more reasonable response is first degree murder. so awesome. The best. We'll have to clip this into the edit, but the best moment from this whole thing is the shot. I will say, Jesse, you gave your all. Jesse Pepe, shout out.
Yeah.
Love your performance as Ivan. That fall down the stairs, I really hope was a stuntman, because it was the worst moment of the entire movie.
Oh God.
It's even in the trailer. Like, the director and the producers saw that moment and were like, this is it. This is the big set piece. This is the big set piece. We should advertise based on this.
Yeah.
She pushes him gently with, I would say, the same level of force that she gently shoved the books at the library.
True.
And this grown
It's her
man,
signature move.
the gentle nudge.
Yeah.
Revenge of the nudge.
Every serial killer has their calling card. You know?
Hers is the nudge. This movie could be called The Nudge. She gently nudges him, and this grown man, his arms are flailing. He falls down the stairs, cracks his head on the tile, and he's out cold. He's
dead.
He's a goner.
Yeah.
And she casually goes back to Kate and Joe's house, and they're like, how was your walk? And she's like, I actually feel so much better. Kind of really drilling home this idea that she's a total psychopath.
Yeah.
We're going to kind of gloss over some of the boring, this movie gets kind of boring at this point.
Yeah.
They end up going to the cabin. She finally convinces Kate and Joe to take her to the cabin, even though they're in the midst of this giant restaurant opening and trying to launch a business and clearly take off work to go take her to this cabin.
This is just a little nitpick, but I do want to point out that the cookout, the murder, the traveling to the lake house, all this happens in the same day.
Oh yeah.
It just, I don't know. It's just like this. So you like had dinner. The wife goes to yoga afterwards. It's like, it's not even noon yet. Like, why did you have a cookout in the morning? I also say, like, Lifetime movies, no more, like, they don't film for more than 3 weeks. Like, that's the max that they will film. And typically it's less than that. And I would venture to guess that it is less than that for this film as well.
Yeah, this might have been shot in 3 hours for all I know. It's like, based on the quality output here, this movie might have been shot in an afternoon.
Yeah.
Between projects. They end up at the lake house, and at this point Danica has figured out that Sam is impersonating her. The real Danica has figured out that Sam is impersonating her and has ingratiated herself into her birth mother's home, and Danica is very concerned. And so she starts to kind of contact the police about it and start kind of raising a ruckus, saying, hey, this girl's not me, including revealing this to Melissa, the friend, and really getting in contact with anyone she can find to say, hey, this girl is not me. The tension is starting to ratchet up. At the cabin, Joe is taking a nap inside, and there's all these little fun details that I love that they put in the script to establish that Samantha is like a foster child who's never had a childhood. Like, again, oscillating between these two zones of like, she's a serial murderer, evil human being, and also just like a kid who's been robbed of her childhood.
Innocence. Yeah.
They're putting together the grocery list for Kate's like store run, and Samantha's like, can we also get s'mores? And Kate's like, why? She's like, I've never had them. I've always wanted to have them. It's like the cheapest snack.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's also every like line like that is framed in like a very menacing way when it's just like normal kid shit. It's so like conflicting.
Yeah, it's a tonal mess. Kate goes to the store, and so while she's out at the store, a police officer has been tasked with tracking down, and in this case a park ranger is trying to locate Danica, who he believes to be Danica, just to confirm that Danica is who she says she is. And so this park ranger pulls up. Joe's inside the cabin sleeping with the door wide open.
But he has a concussion. We don't have to get into that. But
we don't have to get into the concussion thing.
But that's why he's like not easily woken up.
Yeah, he's kind of dipping in and out of consciousness. He's like resting from a concussion that that Samantha caused,
right,
to distract him. And while he's inside sleeping, the park ranger shows up, and Samantha comes out pretending to be Danica, and he's like, "Are you Danica?" And she's like, "Yeah."
No, he says, "Are you Samantha?" Because at this point, I think the real Danica has like alerted the authorities.
He's like, "We're looking for Samantha Brown."
Yeah,
and she's like, "No, I'm Danica." And he's like, "Great." He's like, what do you say? Do you have a glass of water or something?
Do you have your ID?
Oh, do you have your ID? That's what it was. And so she's like, "Yeah, I'll come in and grab it." There's a weird tone to this scene
Yeah.
where it's like, I think they're kind of trying to play it like the park ranger wants to get it on with her.
Like to come inside and get a drink or something?
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I guess. I honestly, that might. I thought that, but then, like, in actuality, it's probably just that actor was not really told what to do, and just like generally just has that vibe.
Just
to
a
him.
horny presence.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't tell if it's the performer having a horny presence or if the subtext of the scene is that this park ranger thinks he's about to get it on with an 18-year-old.
It certainly reads that way.
He's clearly a soon-to-be middle-aged man, and he's like this like well-built like 40-year-old, and he's like, yeah, I'll come inside and get your ID. And it's just, it feels icky.
Yeah.
She grabs a knife. She waits around the corner.
A knife that is clearly one of those springy knives.
Yeah, a little switchblade.
Yeah, the one that like goes in and out.
Yeah, like a
clearly fake.
Yeah. Obviously fake knife. She waits around the corner. Park ranger steps inside, and she just stabs him in the throat.
Will do.
Don't wake Dad.
Kate now receives a call from her real daughter, the real Danica, imploring her, hey, do not return home. Don't be around Sam. She's off of her meds. And this is where she really nails it home. She literally says she's schizophrenic and she's off of her medication.
Yeah. Classic.
Awesome.
I
want you to
very tasteful, thoughtful, well handled.
Well handled indeed. Describe the exchange when Kate returns back home to see Joe.
So she doesn't believe Danica on the phone initially. She gets home. She sees the cop on the front porch dead, starts freaking out, and obviously wakes up Joe and is like, are you okay? Are you okay? Obviously at this point she realizes that it's true. Danica is not who she thought she was, or Samantha or whatever. And then she says, and this is like a classic, like, I guess, ignorant husband trope of these movies, of just like bad movies in general, where he's like, calm down, everything's gonna be fine, and she cuts him off and says, everything's not fine, there's a cop dead on our front porch. I think it's something to that effect. I have the exact quote here. Everything is not fine, there's a dead police officer on our porch. That's the exact quote. And it's like, just like it's spelled out like that is just so funny to me.
Like it's the fact that Joe is not concerned for some reason. Yeah, like he's just a chill guy, I guess.
It's like, oh, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine.
It's a
like,
dead cop on the front porch. Like, what are you making a ruckus
who
about?
among us?
He's like, you irrational woman. Like he's clearly like he's just, it's the classic dumb dad trope, which is always funny. At this point, Sam sneaks back into her foster home. She knows that the cops are hot on her trail now, and so her only next logical step is to try to kidnap Danica, the real Danica, and murder her.
They go out onto the roof, and Sam is holding Danica at knife point, which, again, the reason that I bring up that it's clearly a prop knife is because it's like, it's in the shot and like you can see it. It's not just like something that they cut in for the stunt or whatever. It's like just on display, fake ass knife.
It looks like they got it at Party City.
Yeah.
And they were like, this works.
This isn't gonna change anything. Yes, it will! Yes, it will, Mom!
The real Danica's at knife point. Sam's holding the knife to her throat, and it's
such a gross scene because she's like, mommy. It's like,
it's almost like the writers and it's like almost like they're trying to like gain a little bit of sympathy for Samantha in this moment, but we've just seen her repeatedly murder and torture people and murder them in gruesome ways, and now it's like we're trying to maybe make it feel like she's just a kid who wanted a mom,
which is like true, separated from the evil, awful things that she did.
Oh yeah, and also I think let's just note, if the motivation is that when she's off of her medication she acts erratic and crazy and murderous, which is,
maybe don't open the movie with her killing someone
while she's on her medication.
Right, yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
Okay, at her core she is a murderer, and Kate is like, you can both be my daughters, like just put the knife down. She's doing the most reasonable thing she knows how to do.
She's trying to coax her into letting Danica go by like promising her something that she has no intention of fulfilling, and obviously could not be fulfilled, her having murdered several people at this point.
Yeah. So describe that little climax.
So yeah, she's essentially talking her off the ledge. Sydney Sweeney is giving her all performance-wise. She's screaming.
It really hurts my feelings, Mom.
She's doing the classic Cassie scream from season 2.
Love to see it.
Yeah, legitimately, like, you know, she's fine. She eventually lets Danica go, and the cops storm the roof because they were there, I guess, even though
they were on standby.
Like, I mean, maybe the foster home person called the cops while she was out there. I don't know. Whatever. It's fine. But after that, once Danica's free, Danica and Kate like embrace one another, and they're like happy crying, even though like they've just endured this like traumatic thing, and like they're watching this very like sad
mentally ill woman
being like, you know, arrested and like, you know, presumably tackled to the ground because, you know, that's
and the
how
dialogue is
you do it.
basically like, it's nice to meet you.
Oh my god.
Like,
dude,
fresh off a hostage negotiation, they're like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. They
Yeah.
get like a happy mother-daughter moment.
yep. It's like a meet cute.
It is like a meet cute. We cut to the Kettle Black Bistro that is now open.
X amount of months later,
yeah. We cut to the Kettle Black Bistro, and the real Danica is there with her real biological mom, Kate, and Joe's there as well as Melissa, and they're all hunky-dory, having a great time. There's no, like, residual trauma. There's no, like, everything's fine. Like, they're just happy.
And so she's signing the adoption papers to officially adopt her, and I don't have the exact quote, but I just am reminded that the lady who runs the foster home is like, it's the real one this time, I promise.
She jokes
like,
about
Jesus,
it.
dude.
Trust me, we didn't get it wrong again.
Oh,
it's like,
God,
oh.
this one won't kill someone.
we then get to catch up with our main character, Samantha, and we cut to a psych ward of a mental institution, and we get my favorite moment of the whole movie. It's the punctuation on the whole film is Samantha is sharpening a toothbrush against her bed frame to form a shiv in the mental institution, and a very kind-looking psychiatrist steps in the room and is like, Samantha, what's wrong, Samantha? And camera pushes in. She's hiding the shiv under her bed sheet, and she just looks right in the camera and she goes, Danica, my name is Danica.
Good.
Cut to black.
Good shit.
The wrong daughter.
Yeah.
Code 240, proceed with caution.
Oh, that was a lot.
That was
a lot.
This movie was more upsetting than I expected it to be. And I should say, I think this is probably the case with any episode of this show. Whenever we talk about a movie that's like from a it's cliche, but from a different time, we're not like talking about it like we should cancel this actor because they were in this movie.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Even though they do handle mental health incredibly poorly.
And this has nothing to do with Sydney Sweeney.
She's just an actress. She just was on set doing what she was told, you know?
Yeah. She was a cog in this weird machine.
Lifetime machine, baby.
And we're not trying to like say that Sydney Sweeney did anything wrong, obviously. And I think all the performers in here, I was surprised to see how many of them were like not phoning it in. Like they were really giving their all to this movie.
Well, I think it's also like the director has a very specific way that I don't know anything about them, but has a very specific way that they direct women in film, because every major like female character in the movie has like this moment where they just scream. Like Melissa, when she finds out Ivan fell down the stairs or was pushed, she's like, she killed him, like just
they
screaming.
all act very erratic.
Yeah, and then like I said, Sydney Sweeney does the classic Sydney scream.
Sydney screaming.
I think Kate also, when the police officer's dead on her porch, she has this screaming moment. It's like, I'm acting, you know? Yeah. Could it be that the director was directing them that way? Could it be that actress just wanted to like have a moment where she's showing her chops? Who's to say? Danica's
screaming on the phone, with Kate. Yeah, there's a lot of screaming happening here. other thing that I feel like I noted about that we should note about this movie is that I think we're grading on a curve as well. If you are a big budget movie from an established director, like in episode 1, we discussed Van Helsing, which if you haven't seen, please go check that out. We discussed Van Helsing, which is a pedigreed director with an all-star cast.
Yeah.
And a huge boatload, metric shit ton of money. And I think we have to kind of grade those movies a little bit harsher than we do working class actors, unknowns, doing the best with what they got.
I'll push back on that a little bit because I did a little bit of research in terms of budgeting. And this is just in terms of the budget. Obviously, like you said, if it's a made-for-TV movie, if it's like on Lifetime, there's a certain connotation. I agree. However, Moonlight,
the Barry Jenkins film,
the Barry Jenkins film, Moonlight, and Eighth Grade, which those are both A24 movies.
Bo Burnham's breakout movie,
Moonlight had a budget of $1.5 million.
Wow.
And Eighth Grade had a budget of $2 million.
Wow.
So you can make good movies on that budget, I will say.
Wow.
But Lifetime knows their audience. They know this type of like corny looking movie is going to work.
That's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I was surprised as well. I was like, that is an insanely low budget.
Like, Eighth Grade is a beautiful and incredible film, but Moonlight is like all-time one of the great movies.
Yeah.
Like, and visually one of the better movies I've seen ever. Like,
and like, I think Mahershala Ali, who's not in the whole movie, spoilers, I guess, but he's relatively unknown at that point, probably.
He's he's like a B-list star.
Yeah.
And delivers a ridiculously emotional and incredible performance. And all the generations of the male lead are just amazing in that movie. Everyone acts their ass off in that movie.
Yeah.
It's perfectly directed. It's perfectly written. It's a perfect movie. This is not a perfect movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. After the discussion. But I want to talk about what this movie did. Like, what have you got in terms of like you have anything about critical reception or anything? What have you got?
Yeah.
For this
so
movie?
the movie does not have a critic score on Rotten Tomatoes.
I noticed that as well. Yeah.
It has an audience score of 15%. I didn't read any of the reviews on there, but I was shocked by the fact that it had a 76% on Google reviews. And there are several like 5-star reviews.
It's all my friends from the Sydney Sweeney fan pages.
Yeah,
we kind of stormed the Google reviews.
It could be that. It could be, people who just love Lifetime movies. Could be bots. I don't really know why you would bot the Google review page. But I did find a 5-star review from the Google review page that I wanted to read to you. So
yes.
5 stars. My favorite movie of all time for decades. Godfather, Godfather 2, 2001 Space Odyssey. Most Scorsese movies and Kubrick movies have been my favorites. They could all move aside because this movie beats them all. Such a great story, amazing directing, and great acting. Anyone who gives this movie a bad review is nuts. Just kidding. That's the review.
I love that the 17-year-old who sat down and took the time to write that really thought it through.
Yeah.
And that's the level of effort to like meaningless shit that I absolutely adore.
Yeah, it's like you're banking on probably no one seeing that, but the few people like us and now you, dear viewer, read this and find it hilarious.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think critically, I don't know that this movie, because it never had a theatrical release to my knowledge.
No.
It's on Prime Video right now if you want to go watch it.
Want to follow along with our weekly book club.
Yeah, it's tough for me to like really criticize this because when it comes to like Van Helsing, we were able to discuss like, hey, here's the ways that the movie misstepped, but here's the components that were really, really good. It's very hard with this movie to find a redeeming quality. I'm really reaching to say that our boy Jesse Pepe, shout out to Jesse Pepe, he gave a great performance. Sydney Sweeney obviously did her best. I think there are moments in this movie where she is definitively not doing well in the scenes.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that could just be from experience. I would argue that it is more so just like, what do you do with this dialogue? It's kind of like Hayden Christensen in Attack of the Clones. It's like, how are you supposed to say, I wish I could just wish away my feelings in a way that is compelling?
I hate sand.
Yeah, it's like, how do you do it? How do you do it?
Yeah, and I think there's also, it's hard to distinguish with an actor or actress, like what's the director, not giving them another take and saying, "Oh, that's great. Do that exactly like that again." What's the director and what's the actor? And you can't know.
Yeah.
And I think the way that you can tell usually if you're going to tell if it's direction is, okay, by and large, are all the performances across the board great? If that's the case, like a David Fincher movie, like you're not going to watch a David Fincher movie with one bad performance, because you know that he's like a director at the top of his class who's going to push every single performance to be the best it can be. I think we can chalk some of this up to directing, given that every performance across the board in this movie is bad. There's not a good performance in this movie, and I don't think that's necessarily the actor's fault.
Yeah.
I think
that's typically what I lean towards with any movie. I just would more so blame it on the director or the studio.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
It was, especially if the actor has done other things where they've delivered a great performance, like Sydney Sweeney has a year later in Euphoria. She's delivering fantastic performances across the board. And in this movie, she somehow is presented as awful. So it can't be her fault. It can't be.
Yeah.
I wonder if I like this like subgenre a lot though. Like the like 70s family thriller. What do you think are some movies that have the same, they don't have to be similar genre, but same themes as this movie, but handle it in a better way? Does anything come to mind?
Not too many off the top of my, I mean, Gone Girl is definitely one where it's like not like a similar plot structure, but similar themes of like,
similar tone ideally.
Yeah. Similar tone where it's like a domestic strife.
Yeah.
Obviously that's very vague and broad, but I would say that's one that is like more or less well done.
Oddly enough, the one that comes to mind for me is Hereditary. Because it's like,
and that's more of a horror movie, I would say.
Yeah, and Gone Girl's like thriller, cat and mouse, and I think this movie does try. There's a lot of things I want to say, like this movie tries to do this. I don't know if it's trying to do anything other than just make a buck. But in an ideal world, I think this movie would lean a little bit more in that horror realm, because you have like a lot of stabbing in the throat, and you have like, you know, which, spoiler alert, Gone Girl has a little bit of that too. But Hereditary, while it does deal with more supernatural elements, it deals with like the drama and the conflict created by a family dynamic so well. And this movie, if it were a better film, could absolutely delve into that. Yeah. I would have loved to see, it's hard to even discuss how we would fix this movie because it's so overtly bad.
And like you said, we're grading it on a curve. Like, we're not stupid. We know this is a Lifetime TV movie. We know what comes with that. But at the same time, this is a podcast where it was two white boys yapping. We can think of things that could legitimately make it better. Yeah. Which is, I think, maybe just a completely different tone where you have this girl who's mentally unwell, who maybe she does go off her meds, but maybe we don't have the opening scene be where she murders someone, so we can be a little bit sympathetic to her. And then the way that I thought the movie would legitimately go when I saw the trailer was like, okay, she's gonna like do some like minorly bad stuff, like mess up her garden, do stuff like that, because she's never been in a normal familial household before. Yeah. Okay. And then we end with them actually becoming a family. Maybe like they adopt both of them. You know, obviously that's completely different from what this movie was going for, but I do think that it could have been legitimately better and not as frustrating in terms of the mental health stuff.
Yeah, I think that is a big point. I think also, if I kind of lean the same way, and I think one of the ways you could have definitely made that work is give some depth to the Kate character, instead of having her be this monolithic nice woman who just solely wants to, like, you know, adopt her daughter and be reconnected. Like, that can be her character's core, but maybe give it some struggle, or maybe have there be some like wrestling with her own failings, potential failings, or perceived failings as a parent, like having
for
her
not adopting her, or not keeping the child,
for not keeping the child, or for, you know, not trying to reach out and reconnect sooner. You know, like any of these things could be great for inner turmoil and conflict within that character. Residual guilt and shame she might feel. In this movie, the Kate character has no perceivable residual pain whatsoever
Yeah.
from giving up her first daughter for adoption.
Yeah.
It's kind of just like, oh yeah, I did that. Now you're here. That's great.
Well, she thought that she was adopted, but it turned out that never happened.
Yeah,
apparently.
that was established early that she saw Danica walk away with a family, but then when they found out she had a heart condition or something, they were like, oh, we don't want her anymore, which is insane. Like, this one's broken.
Ugh.
Is like so gross.
I mean, I'm sure that does happen, but yeah, it's just for this movie, it feels just like
gross.
tasteless.
Yeah, it's just tasteless completely. I think having Kate have some inner turmoil would be nice. I'd love to see Joe not be a character that's an absolute dunce the entire time. Like, having him. We glazed over one of my favorite lines, which I want to just revisit real quick.
Sure.
He says, he's the one who's encouraging, like we were talking about a little bit off camera, he's encouraging Kate to reconnect with her daughter.
Right.
He's like really pushing for that the whole movie. Then when Samantha, pretending to be Danica, enters their home and they're meeting this biological daughter for the first time, they find out she's homeless. No, you're good.
Yeah.
She's homeless. And the line when Kate says, well, we should like put her in the spare bedroom that was going to be their baby room when they were going through IVF.
And he's like, ew.
He's like,
she's
what?
stinky. She's stinky, icky.
You want her to move in is the line that he says that I wrote down. It's like, yeah, dude.
What did you think was going to happen?
It's your homeless child. This is your wife's biological daughter who's homeless.
Right. And the implication when they like, I guess, discover or like are shown her Facebook profile is that like he's literally like trying to say reconnecting with her could change our lives right after they found out they lost their baby.
Almost like we could have a child.
Right. Exactly. It's clearly implied that he's saying that. And yet when the opportunity presents itself, he's like, ew, gross.
Come on. She's stinky.
Yeah.
It's so weird. The visuals of this film, I remember I was watching this with my wife and she looked up on IMDb like when the movie came out because she was so taken aback that it didn't come out in like 2004.
Yeah.
Like she thought Sydney Sweeney must have been like 12 when this movie was actually produced. Visually, the cinematography and the lighting, it's bad even for a made-for-TV movie. It looks like complete and total utter garbage. Like it looks like it was filmed on a couple of camcorders and like a work light from a hardware store.
Yeah.
It's absolutely visually
I don't
garbage.
think they even had any lighting for this.
They probably didn't.
Not even.
It's like soap opera level.
Yeah. Well, even soap operas have like they have a look to them. This is
a little bit
just,
of drama in the scene.
like kind of flat, but like in a way that like you know what you're getting. This is just like uniquely like everyone looks like shit. Everyone's lit poorly. Even Sydney Sweeney, like not to say she's like ugly or anything.
No, but this is by far
all.
the worst she's ever looked on
like
screen.
she looks flush, and I think that the lighting in this movie is just like, what
there
are
are
you
scenes
doing?
where because of the bad lighting and color grading, she outright looks sickly.
Yes.
She looks like anemic.
She looks like, for the people that have seen it, she looks like she does in Immaculate, where she's like this woman who's pregnant with a demon, basically.
That's a crazy comparison. She looks the same in this movie playing an 18-year-old as she does in a movie where she's pregnant with a demon baby. Yeah, that's rough.
All right, so if we want to talk about this, like how it's aged since it came out, obviously the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 15%. The score on Google, though, is 76%. Ooh. So would you say that the audience score or the Google score is more indicative of what the movie actually is?
I'm going to go with, I think the Rotten Tomatoes audience score of this film is not only more accurate, I would go as far as to say it's generous. This movie is top to bottom a pile of steaming garbage with no redeeming qualities whatsoever. There is not a piece of this movie. It borders on laughably funny, but it never quite gets there because the subject material is so sensitive with mental illness, adoption, and infertility that the movie is not even a fun watch. It's borderline an upsetting watch, if not outright upsetting like you described at times. There is no redeeming quality of this movie. I would give this a negative 15%. Yeah. What would you say?
I agree completely. I think it's worse than it has any right to be. Like, obviously it's a Lifetime movie, so again, there's a curve, but even then it's like, just like makes me feel gross. Like I need to take a bath after I watch this movie.
Yeah, you need to take a bath, and also it's so bad at times without like you mentioned Sharknado earlier, right? And there's those movies that are intentionally bad and they're kind of comical, you know.
I will say the director did do. I know I said I didn't know anything about him, but I did briefly look. He directed some like shark attack type movies.
Okay.
So
so this is kind of his bag.
Yeah.
I think this movie is so bad and mishandles so many subject matters that I don't understand how you could make a movie this bad. Like there's actually a level of effort that I think someone would have to put in, or a team would have to put in, to make something this awful.
Yeah, that's why I lean more towards like the quality of this movie being on the director to a certain extent, but even just the studio. It's like, look, this is a Lifetime movie. We need it to handle mental health terribly. Like we need it to be exploiting a specific mental health or mental illness, and just make it a spectacle.
Absolutely. And also, let's cast total unknowns, right? So there's no star power behind it. And let's not give the movie an appealing hook or premise at all. Like, that's the thing about, like, when we were talking about Van Helsing last week, there's at least a hook that you go like, ooh, like in a pitch meeting, you go like, oh, if I were to tell someone the hook of this film, the only thing, like when I've talked to friends, they're like, what's the next movie you guys are reviewing? I always just say, oh, it's a Sydney Sweeney movie. And they go, oh, okay. But at the time, she's not famous. So that's not a hook. Right. But if I were to explain the plot of this movie, like tell you the hook of the plot, it's like, oh, a girl is impersonating a woman's biological daughter. That to me is not even a compelling premise for a movie. Like it's a miracle to me that this movie got made.
If it were like an A24 film, I mean, I know A24
but
is
that
a
would
bit
be the
of a
hook.
meme. Right.
The hook would be it's an A24 film.
Right.
If you're going in totally blind.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Like, yes, if a better studio with better actors and better directors made this movie, it's like, okay, yeah, the hook might be enough. But it's like, by itself, that's not a compelling premise for a movie. Tack on the fact that it's dealing with schizophrenia and medications and all these other themes, and it's like, it's just a dumpster fire of a movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up for The Wrong Daughter, starring good old Sydney Sweeney.
We love her. You know, we wish her nothing but the best. Obviously, this didn't ruin her career.
Nope.
It arguably skyrocketed her career. Who knows?
We don't know.
This could have been the jumping off point.
None of us can know.
It popped her off to call back to the beginning of the episode.
We appreciate everybody watching or listening to this episode. Please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. It really genuinely does help us out so much. We've been super pleased with the response from the Van Helsing episode so far. Like the YouTube shorts and
incredible.
the TikToks.
Yeah. I couldn't, I mean, we're just starting off, but genuinely I'm so glad that we've had the response we have so far. Like the video, subscribe, be sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to your podcasts. Thanks for listening.